Hey guys, Chris Peach here, and welcome to Money Peach TV. Hey, do you remember growing up learning how to handle money? Yeah, neither do I. So that's why we're here today to make money fun again. We're going to talk about the principles in life that matter when it comes to managing your money the right way. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Money Peach TV. Before we jump into this incredible episode of Money Peach TV, I want to take a second to talk to you guys about my #1 online program for showing you how to go from with money to being awesome with money, and that's Awesome Money Course. So head on over to awesomemoneycourse.com so you can see why people all over the world are taking advantage of this #1 online program for showing you how to be awesome with your money. All right, guys, we are back with episode #6 of Money Peach TV. And today we're going to talk about one of the most important reasons, if not the most important reason for saving money, and that is for an emergency fund. So here's the deal. Here in society today, when we have an emergency, we've been trained to think that that's what we have credit cards for. We have credit cards to protect us from financial disaster, protect us from emergency. We have credit cards with that line of credit available, so when things do go wrong, we can take care of it. Well, let me ask you this. When is the worst time to go further into debt? It's when you're broke, and it's when you're in a financial mess, right? So let's stop that thinking for a second. Let's think a little bit differently. What if instead of becoming worse off financially when we go through a disaster, what if we kind of beefed up protection a little bit for ourselves? What if we were proactive? So that's what I'm talking about with an emergency fund. You know, it's crazy to believe in today's world that right now 6 out of 10 people cannot write a check for $1,000. So that means something happens to you or to any of your neighbors, per se. 6 out of the 10 people that you know cannot write a check for $1,000. That's not okay. I mean, we're living in a society where $1,000 is no longer becoming that much money anymore, right? So with that said, we need to start being proactive. We need to start setting aside money for emergencies. You know, I was reading a report recently that says in every given 10-year period, every single person will experience a devastating financial emergency. So with that said, we know that it's coming. We know that it's a train that's coming and we can't stop it. So instead of trying to stop it, let's just be ready for it, right? Emergencies are going to happen. But let me tell you this, when you have an emergency fund, that emergency is not that big a deal anymore. It's just kind of, it's life. Life goes on. So here's how we set that up. People always ask, Chris, where should I start saving for emergencies? How much should I set aside? And these are all questions that are great questions that should be answered. But again, when were you ever taught? That's why we're here today to talk about this. So emergency funds, let's talk about that. Emergency fund. Here's what I want you to do. Step 1 is before you set up your sinking funds or you do anything like that, I want you to save up a little bit of money. Now, how much of that money depends on your income. So I have a rule of thumb. If you make less than $20,000 a year annually, gross income, I want you to save up $500 for your emergency fund. Okay? $500. If you make between $20,000 and $50,000, I want you to set aside $1,000. If you make over $50,000 a year, then you're going to need a $2,000 emergency fund. Now, this is not a save all emergency fund. This is just to get us through the hiccups in life. Okay, this is an initial, we'll call it a starter emergency fund. Okay, so we have this emergency fund set up. Now, what do we do with this money? So I want this money to be liquid. And what I mean by liquid is a financial word, a very fancy financial word for how easy do you have access to it. So I want it liquid or accessible in 30 minutes or less. So here's some ideas where you can stick this small baby starter emergency fund. You can actually stick it in a safe at your house if you have that. You can go stick it in the bank. But if you do that, pause for a second. I want you guys to keep it away from your checking account because emergency funds that lie next to their checking accounts disappear very quickly. You'll notice that. So open up a bank somewhere else, stick money there. Here's an idea that I really like that I had one of my students tell me about. They took the term liquid to a whole nother level. They took the $2,000 they had saved up, they stuck it in a Ziploc baggie, they zipped it up, stuck it in a cup, filled it with water, stuck it in the freezer. They had their emergency fund frozen in the back of their freezer. And I thought, well, why would you do that? And they said, well, it takes about 30 minutes to melt. So that's enough time to make sure that we definitely want to use it. How great of an idea is that? So there's another great idea that you could be doing. So you have your starter emergency fund. How quickly do I want you to get your emergency fund? Well, if you're one of my students, if we've done financial coaching, you'll hear me say that I want this done in 30 days or less. So you're thinking, Chris, I'm paycheck to paycheck. I'm barely getting by, and you're asking me to save up $500 or $1,000 or even $2,000 in 30 days? Absolutely, I am. Here's the way I want you to look at it, okay? I want you to look at it as life or death. Let's say that you have a loved one. You have somebody that you care about deeply, all right? You care about them so much that you would do anything for them. This loved one, say, comes down with a sickness. They come down with this sickness, and they're not going to make it, okay? The doctor says, look, what you have, it's not curable. You're not going to make it. However, we do actually have a cure over here. It's $2,000, and the only way it's available is if you pay cash for it. If you take this vial over here, you'll live. How quickly, with that in mind, would you get that $2,000? You would have it in like 3 days, right? That's how I want you to look at your emergency fund. If an emergency fund can happen at any time, think that it's going to happen in 2 or 3 days from now. You need to have some kind of protection in place because you don't want to go further into debt. So that's our baby, our starter emergency fund. I'm going to talk about in the next episode what we're going to do after we get the starter emergency fund. So we're going to start off with this little starter, this baby. This is just to get us through the hiccups. Look, pretty much 96% of the emergencies in life are going to be handled with a $2,000 or $1,500 emergency fund, right? There's only a few things outside of that window. So we have to prepare for that, but I want you to do other things with money first. So once we do those other things that we're going to talk about in other lessons, we're going to come back and we're going to complete this emergency fund. So what is a completed emergency fund? Well, the rule of thumb that I like is I like to start off with a 3 to a 6 month window. And you're thinking, well, that's a big difference. 3 to 6 months of what? Great question. It's 3 to 6 months of emergency expenses. So you are now doing a budget, I hope. So we're looking at our budget and we say, okay, if things were to go bad, if you lose your job, I lose my job, things go completely crazy, what are the expenses that we must have in place? What are the expenses that we have to pay? So for example, your mortgage or your rent, that has to be paid, right? You have to keep the lights on. You got to feed yourself. You got to put gas in your car. You got to pay the insurance. You got to do certain things. Vacation funds being put on hold. Going out to eat, the fanciest cell phone plan, a new watch, all these things are going to be put on hold. But you have this list of expenses, and those expenses are kind of like the must-haves. Like we have to have these. They're not wants, they're needs. So look at your needs. Okay, so now look at that and look at it on a monthly basis. So let's, for example, say, you know what? We need $2,000 a month to survive. $2,000 a month minimum to survive. Now I want you to look at either a 3-month to a 6-month window. So if you were 3 months, we would say, okay, I need $2,000 a month times 3 months. I need a $6,000 emergency fund set aside for protection. If you are a 6-month person, okay, that's easy. You need $12,000 set aside. Now, who decides that 3 to 6 months? Well, let me help you with that. Here's how you go about doing it. Let's say that you're a teacher, or you're a nurse, or a firefighter, or a police officer, or you work for the government, or you have a very stable job. You're going to be fine to lean on that 3-month emergency fund because, hey, you have that stability, right? Let's say you're on the other side. Let's say you're a real estate agent, or you're a small business owner. You don't have a steady paycheck. You are your paycheck, right? You can go months at a time without receiving a commission check. So I need you to lean 6 months, maybe even a 7-month emergency fund because, hey, if something happens and you're in that month where the sales haven't come through or things didn't close and you're not getting paid, you need a beefy emergency fund. So 3 to 6 months, you decide. If you have any questions on how I can build this emergency fund fastest or where I should be parking this emergency fund, I want you to go to moneypeach.com/session6. I'll have all the show notes in there. I'll have some links to some great articles to get you jump started. So with that said, last thing is okay, Chris, I have a $12,000 emergency fund. I don't want to keep it in a cup of water frozen in my refrigerator or my freezer. I don't blame you. I wouldn't do that either. So where should you park that? Remember the last episode I talked about that little thing called sinking funds? Well, guess what else is a great sinking fund? Your emergency fund. Imagine if you had $12,000 sitting in that sinking fund called emergency fund. That's where we park ours. You have that happen. What if this happens? This is what happened to us. My wife calls me and she says, honey, we have water and it's brown. It's leaking out of our garage and into the driveway. It's coming from our hot water heater. Long time ago, that would have freaked me out because that's about a $700-800 expense. So what did I do? On the way home, I pulled into old Home Depot. I walked over to the hot water heater section, grabbed a hot water heater, and I drove home with one. It didn't bother me. I didn't have an effect. I had no stress. That's how life should be. That's how I want life for you. When the hot water heater goes out, you go buy another one. That's how it's supposed to be. I didn't have to go into debt or finance it or do anything crazy like that. I just bought one. So what happens when you have an emergency? What do? Well, the first thing I want you to do is refill that thing back up, right? If you have an emergency, you need that protection. So think of it as like a financial airbag. That thing popped off, it went off, it protected you. Let's get that thing back in place and ready to go. So whatever you're doing in your life, whether it's investing or saving for sinking funds or this or that, I want you to stop it, refill that emergency fund, and then go back to everyday life. That's how life's supposed to work. That's how you could become proactive. This is the stuff they probably should have told us about in high school and college to prepare us for the real world. We're here talking about it now for a reason. So all right, guys, number one thing to protect yourself with money is not a credit card. It's not a line of credit. It's not your broke brother-in-law or your parents. It is an emergency fund. So get your emergency fund going. You have 30 days or less. Next episode, we are going to be jumping into the world of paying off your debt. Believe it or not, there are two main schools of thought with paying off debt. We're going to talk about both of them, and we're going to talk about the number one way that I recommend. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Money Peach TV. But before you leave, I want you to leave with a free gift. Go to moneypeach.com and please download my free budgeting form. 12,000 people as of today all over the world are using this thing every single month. I want you to be one of them as well. The number one habit of highly successful people is being proactive. Be proactive by getting on a budget. Moneypeach.com. Download the budget there. And also don't forget to check out awesomemoneycourse.com, the number one online program for taking you from with your money to showing you how to truly manage your money the right way. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Boom, da-ba-doom, boom, da-ba-doom.